It's now my great pleasure to introduce James Whitehead. James is Oxfam International's, Oxfam Great Britain's Global Innovation Advisor. As I mentioned earlier this morning, he's been here and working at a distance also with colleagues in Oxfam and Inventium to produce the ACFID working paper that you'll have on innovation. James has been looking at Oxfam's work at scale, exploring alternative models of delivery and supporting country programs to effectively develop and scale cutting-edge programs, as well as initiating collaboration with new stakeholders so as to accelerate solutions to some of the development problems that Oxfam, but frankly all of our organisations, encounter and wrestle with. So, without further ado, please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to James, who's come all the way from England to be with us this morning. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I've got to say, starting with a little bit of honesty, the future crunch, Angus and Tane, it's really exciting to hear that. But my reaction is twofold. I get excited, but I also kind of want to curl up in a ball. So this is the Global Innovation Advisor saying, oh, but actually the future I find a little bit daunting. You know, so there's an element of, so when we deal with the word innovation, I'm pulled in two directions. Excitement, but also fear. I don't want to be disrupted. And I worry about people in the countries in which we work being disrupted in a negative way. So I'm conflicted. And so I think it's really important to frame innovation right. So what I want to do is frame innovation in a way which may be useful. I want to then look at collaboration, then look at mindset shift. And I was asked to end with a challenge, but I'll end with some questions instead. So framing innovation. Well, in our sector, I like to use the word social before the word innovation. So talking about social innovation. And then I want to say, let's put impact first and have innovation as the byproduct rather than the destination. Because there is a lot of froth around this word, and we need to cut through it and say what is useful for us in our sector and what is actually a deviation from what is important. So when I think about impact first, I think about being in Yemen, in Hodeidah Governorate, at a time of great hunger, and seeing people receiving cash to get them through a very difficult time. And it was not just that at the school I was visiting where the cash transfer was taking place, that those people were going to be in a better situation and have food on the table. The mums, the dads, the children were going to have food on the table. It was the fact that it was happening in hundreds of schools and different community centres around Yemen, and we were able to be reaching 500,000 people. And the reason why was because we'd worked differently than the way we normally did. We were working through the post office. And normally the post office isn't on my radar in terms of humanitarian response. But the team there wasn't saying, oh, how can we be more innovative? Wouldn't it be great to develop an app? They were saying there's a serious problem in this country right now, and we've got to find better ways of addressing it. And it was that resourcefulness which drove us to do things in a different way. And so the innovation was a byproduct. So we could see, I maybe define it as saying innovation is new solutions that meet unmet needs and improve people's lives. And then I would say maybe we do people in poverty a disservice when we're complacent and when we are not as resourceful and collaborative as we could be. I also want to do another thing about when you're trying to solve a problem or address a problem. I think sometimes even the word solve is too grand. One doesn't always have to look for the new and shiny. I remember meeting with Ecuadorian farmers and how important it was that they were preserving and sharing ancient seed varieties which were far more drought resistant than any which were available on the market. It doesn't have to be the new. So innovation might have to be the new, but what we do has to be effective. Another thing in terms of the framing is about silver bullets. There's an awful lot of silver bullet language in the innovation world, and I don't really buy it. And I don't know if you buy it, and I think that some of the skepticism around this word and the faddishness is around a selling of silver bullets. The challenges of this world are complex and wicked. So a drought in the Russian prairies leads to food riots on the streets of Cairo. The challenges stretch from a farmer's field in Cambodia to the food in my fridge. So I'm really pleased with the work that Oxfam's been doing with others on Behind the Brands, which is looking at the 10 largest food and beverage companies in the world and seeing how can we work with them, sometimes through prodding and shouting and through all the different people who support and engage in campaign, to say, you need to change your supply chains. Because this world is interconnected. So the problems are complex, and so the solutions are not always simple and straightforward and working on single levels. And I think most of us in this room know that, and that's why we sometimes have a skepticism of that innovation word, and quite rightly so. There's a spectrum of innovation. So I do get excited about the fact that we're working with Griffith University around 3D printing and its application in humanitarian contexts. But I also get excited about a global arms trade treaty and how that can be put into force to reduce death and injury through unregulated flows of arms across the world into conflict situations. So framing, impact first, innovation is a servant. And we are in, so well put, a time of unprecedented complexity and change, which means the solutions are not always going to be hands in the air, wonderful apps, bits of kit, this, that, and the other. It's complex, and the problems of poverty involve power and inequality and deeply rooted injustice. And we need to be aware of that. And so innovation needs to know its place, find its place, and be part of that solution. So I better move on to collaboration. Often when I visit a country programme, one of the first questions I ask is, so who else are we working with here? And I find that if the answer to that question is not very interesting, what we're doing doesn't seem to be that interesting, that there's a collaborative advantage. So almost all the best examples that I know have got unusual suspects, different brains, different organisational capabilities coming together. It's the collaboration which often makes things happen. Business, government, the minister talked about private sector and charities, but I see there's more than that. There's business, there's government, whether it's here, whether it's in the countries in which we're working, there's academia, there's civil society groups, community groups. It's these combinations that bring change, and it's the new combinations which maybe bring new opportunities for us. So in Bangladesh, we're working with Swiss Re, the global insurance company. We're working with Pragati, who are a local insurance provider, the Bangladeshi Institute of Water Modelling, who I wouldn't have ordinarily thought, okay, let's go and have a chat with them. and the government, and I shouldn't forget to mention farmers' groups, on ways to automatically trigger payments for people who are suffering from flooding, so that there's a much faster, much more reliable approach to dealing with disasters when they happen. And I think about having porous borders, and I wonder whether our borders between us as each organisation and other organisations are sufficiently porous. And I think about that in terms of larger organisations and how they interface with smaller organisations, and realising the different capabilities, the different levels of agility that other organisations might have, and how we can put that together to greater effect and for greater impact. So collaborative advantage is something that I feel so strongly about. It's the easiest way to move us forward, and it's about moving out of comfort zones. And I did feel for the program staff in Bangladesh, because it's not difficult. If you don't know how to engage with an insurance company, you don't even know which door to knock on, which phone number to use. You've got to start somewhere, and it's quite de-skilling to say, we don't really know what we're doing here, we're going to see where it goes. It requires a certain bravery to try that and to reach out across to other organisations who might in turn say, and who are you? And what are you doing here? And it takes work. So I wanted to move on to mindset shifts. And Angus and Tane will be pleased to hear that I'm slowly realising that I am conditioned, deeply conditioned, and I'm trying to get the mindset shift. I'm trying to move from linear thinking, but it's hard. I'm trying to move out of, I'm just trying to work out how many years of working in international development, maybe 20 years of working in international development, of a get money, give money mindset, which is so deeply entrenched in my thinking that I might move away from it for a while, and then I find myself right back in the same sort of conversations and the same mindset again. I often can see the project that we're working on and not the wider ecosystem in which we're working. And I'm starting to see that there's a blurred line between business and charity. Look at Lanka Social Ventures is a social enterprise that we've just started in Sri Lanka. So it's a business, yeah. It's a charity, yes. It receives grant funding, yes. It receives, it can receive investment, yes. It can make grants if it wants to. It can take an equity position in another social enterprise working in the agricultural space if it wants to. There's this blurring of lines between being an NGO and being a business, and it's a murkier world than that. It's a less clearly defined situation. It's not an us and them anymore. And when I think about the possibilities for change, for example, through the top 10 food and beverage companies, and I just stand back and think, if you guys move, that's when there's going to be significant change for people. The problem with this seeing business models everywhere approach is I went to collect my kids from school, and I saw someone selling cakes to raise money for the school, and I thought, oh, it's a government school, so it's a state institution, but is this a social enterprise run through volunteers in order to cross-fund? So I'm getting confused. It's intermingling, and now wherever I look, I go to a hospital, and I'm dazed by the volunteer group here, and the cafe here, which is the Starbucks or whatever. This company's in there, that company's in there. So I thought it was a government-run hospital, right? And there's so many different layers going on. And so the business model view has been really helpful for me, and I'm starting to lose that conditioning that we are an NGO, and we have one or two set business models. But I keep on falling back. I still find myself seeing beneficiaries as beneficiaries, though I ought to know better by now. On a different note, I'm starting to realise that being perpetually busy is not a badge of honour or a reflection of just how important I am. It's actually a symptom of dysfunctional organisational culture and misaligned priorities, and I'm missing the real picture. And I think my biggest mindset shift is that I thought I was thinking outside the box, but all I'd done was shuffled to the side of the box. And I find there's that thing about, do you think you can think outside the box? And you say, yes, I can. And it's almost like the people who say, yes, I can, and the people who can't, the people saying, oh, no, I'm not sure if I can, are actually the ones who can't. So I'm still shuffling around the box. But the reason why I'm going on a bit about the mindset shift is the opportunities which might be there are the ones I just can't see if my mindset hasn't shifted. So I won't see the post office. They won't be on my radar. I won't see the insurance company, the global insurance company, the local trader, the brewery, the university, the enterprise incubator, and I may not be listening closely enough to the Ecuadorian farmer to realise that whether it's innovation or not, there's something hugely valuable that she's got. Mindset shift. And then ending with a challenge or some questions. The first question is, how much innovation and creativity is already there, bubbling away in the DNA of your organisation? How many great examples are already there of resourcefulness, of commitment to find different ways to hack a problem? And then the other question is, how much business as usual complacency is there in your individual organisation, in the collective DNA of the sector? Another question. We're not going to take answers on this, by the way. Do you have a level of organisational agility that is very well suited to the 1980s? But isn't perfectly calibrated to the decade we live in, or the decade beyond? Another question. When I say our sector, do you think of the wider development sector, or do you mostly think about NGOs and Australian NGOs? Are you a little bit wary of other actors coming into our sector? Here's another different question. There's kind of just a random bunch of questions, right? Who have you had an amazing conversation with in the last couple of weeks that has challenged you and stretched you? As leaders. On the leader question, are you a leader of followers or a leader of leaders? And is that relevant to the conversation about innovation? Are you a change ninja? I'm looking in organisations, I'm looking in Oxfam, I say, who are the ninjas here? Who are the people who are hungry to find different ways and see things from a different angle because they got this feeling there must be something more? So, are you naturally collaborative? Are you resourceful? Do you have an itch that you can't scratch? Are you curious, and are you angry at the injustice of poverty? Are you a ninja? So the word innovation, I sometimes find in Oxfam it's really useful not to use the word, but to try and make things happen. It's maybe a ninja approach as we're going undercover with innovation. So innovation, I don't know if it's useful as a word for you. It's not useful for as a word. But I do know that there are opportunities out there. There is much more that we can do. There are far better ways that we can collaborate. And there are people we haven't met with, haven't worked with, haven't included in this wider effort to really make a difference in people's lives, with people who are affected by poverty and injustice. And I know that we can do more, and I know that there are amazing people, and I've met a lot of them already in the sessions we were doing earlier this week, and I'm confident and I'm excited, and I think that the Australian NGO sector, just as we were talking about leapfrogging, is able to leapfrog. And I'm excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, James, for that really important series of questions about reframing our mindset to think about how to make things happen. And there'll be opportunities to ask James' question after morning tea as part of the plenary panel session we're going to have.